Good evening. Welcome to the Biggs Report. The power to destroy is terrible. The power to end all in life that is beautiful. If we perceive what Kennedy called the final war of mankind truly would be, then we can be forgiven for weakening, forgiven for handing over our future and the future of our children to the blind dictates of an unelected body. For make no mistake, proponents of arms control ask no less of us than that we place our lives in the hands of those with no accountability to our citizens, nor any feeling of particular concern for them. We are to trust some who truthfully hate our land of freedom with our defense, because we cannot trust one another. When you cross the street, you place your life in the hands of your fellow citizens. If they drive irresponsibly, if they fail to stop, you will die. The automobile and the firearm are the two principal symbols of how we must trust other citizens in our country to act as responsible citizens should act, to prove themselves worthy of the faith we have in them, of the faith that we have in one another. Yet we see that in these two areas, many trust the government more than they do themselves. A madman uses a gun to kill innocents, and we demand that the gun be outlawed. How does that help our cause? If it be outlawed, will the mere illegality of possession deter a madman? The illegality of murder does not seem to, or he wouldn't be called mad. Yet if we make it illegal, then the level-headed citizen who abides by the laws of the land will not have one, surely, and just as surely, when faced with a madman who does, he will be defenseless unless we can blanket every corner of every street and every city with police, and not even then. Indeed, we are more concerned with the firearm in the hands of our fellow citizen than the automobile in his hands. Even when we know for a fact that we slay one another by means of the automobile in greater numbers in a year than by firearm in a decade, we ask for greater and greater government intervention in the making and use of our automobiles. More and more safety features, more and more limitations, more intervention into so many aspects of that industry that the industry itself falls apart and recedes into bankruptcy. Yet we see no increase in overall safety on our roads. We see no major shift or change in our feeling of security on a highway, or indeed when crossing a street. For every increase in so-called safety, a sense of our reliance on the government to take care of us grows. And we act even more irresponsibly than we did when we didn't expect the auto manufacturer to save us from our own driving. Better and better cars, made at ever greater cost, see no improvement in fatalities in the hands of less and less responsible drivers. For we have achieved a spiraling lack of will to take responsibility for our own actions that would have appalled our forebears. Hand over your freedoms, America. Hand them to one who can take care of you, somebody with the strength to intervene, to keep you a child at their mother's side all the days of your life. Have faith, America. Have faith in their ability to save, to protect, to do all for you, and do not expect to do for yourself. Yet when we lose faith in our own government, when we see the inevitable, that they are but men, sometimes weak, oftentimes prone to mistakes, even corruption, do we take responsibility for ourselves? Never. We realize what John F. Kennedy spoke about in his inaugural address concerning the Cold War. Let both sides, for the first time, formulate serious and precise proposals for the control of arms and bring the absolute power to destroy other nations under the absolute control of all nations. In resonant tones, do we then give our own sovereignty into the control of all nations? How can we trust a Pelosi, a Franks, or a Biden with the nuclear trigger? Trust them with the very power to annihilate mankind? They look cartoonish to us, and we know they are imperfect. We have handed our own lives over to our government and discovered that that government has no clothes. Now, we become afraid and move to create some international body, some creation of all world nations that will tell our own leaders how many nuclear weapons we may have. We speak of disarmament at the very moment when an avowed enemy launches a missile toward our western coast. All men of good will and judgment look for a day when nuclear weapons may be obsolete or extinct, but mere wishing will not make it so. And in this world in which some who hate us have weapons that can kill us, we must retain similar weapons ourselves, or face the blank, uncaring face of a global police committee that refuses to see any evil in our enemies or any good in us. The control of arms does not bring peace. The control of arms allows for the freedom of action of the lawless. Look at the crimes committed not long ago on a university campus in Virginia. The campus was a zone of absolute arms control. None were allowed to carry weapons there, yet when a madman smuggled in a weapon anyway, where were the armed citizens as he wantonly slew? How far would he have gotten if one, or two, or three of his would-be victims had a firearm of their own? We all know the answer. If you respect life most of all, if you wish to protect the innocent, do not outlaw the weapon, but place the weapon in the hands of good men or good nations. If by some magic the lack of weapons could create peace, then surely we would not have survived the Cold War when our and our enemies' stockpiles of weapons rose to astounding heights. If the lack of weapons brings peace, then what shall we say of Rwanda, where people too poor to own firearms hacked one another to pieces with machetes? Will you ban kitchen knives as well? I suppose we must go on, then, to control the supply of rocks with which crazy men may hit one another, as they have been doing for thousands of years. Mexico is said to suffer violence because of U.S. guns. They proudly claim, as their very neighborhoods are taken over by armed gangs, that many types of weapon legal here are illicit in that ever so peaceful state. Why, then, if more weapons means more violence, must the very same gangs act so much more circumspectly when they cross to New Mexico or Arizona? Why do they not control areas of Phoenix as they do parts of Mexico City? Is it possible that a well-armed citizenry as exists in these parts of the United States would never lay down to be tyrannized by drug peddlers, as no less proud or worthy men denied by their government the right to protect themselves must do in Mexico? If we enter into agreement with nations that do not honor agreements to limit our own nuclear arms, what is to stop them from acting toward this agreement as they have toward every other agreement or resolution made in regards to them? Those nations of the world which will honor their agreements, which will stand behind their word, are not those whose possession of nuclear arms concerns us. The very nature of the regime in India, France, or Israel, democratic nations that honor commitments as we do, and who responsibly keep their weapons from falling into rogue hands, leaves us with little pressing need to force them to limit their arms. It is those nations that do not honor an agreement, that allow their arms controls to be undermined, that act as rule breakers and rogues themselves, that concern us, as well they should. What good is it then to bind them with paper? What to apply to them more rules? If murder is illegal but the madman will do it anyway, if some firearms in Mexico are illegal but gangs procure them anyway, if UN resolutions limit the actions of rogue states and they carry out their weapon programs anyway, what good does it do to bind the hands of the law-abiding in order to catch the criminal? We cannot hand over the future security of our own children to some international body or agreement because we do not trust our own legislators. We must trust one another, as we do every day on the highway. If we cannot conceive someone like Barney Franks holding the key to the destruction of the human race, then we know the solution. It comes on November 4th of every other year.